Solape is the CEO and co-founder of the HerVest. Well, Solape, could you tell us what gave birth to this intervention in the first place?
Thank you so much, Chamberlain. In the first place, as you said, it's a case, HerVest is a story of how we could ramp up women's financial inclusion and access. And that came from insights gained while I was working and marketing for financial brands for over 12 years. So I realized that women were not adopting financial services, and then it was underwhelming them. But we quickly realized that we cannot talk about financial inclusion and access without economic empowerment. And looking at the AFDB numbers about the $42 billion economic gender gap in Africa, about 36% of it is trapped in women in agriculture. So it was natural for us to look at what was holding women in agriculture back. And we realized that a lot of them are being held back due to lack of funds, capital, lack of farming best practices, and then because they lack access to competitive markets. That's what HerVest is solving for these women. We bring forward blended financing for the women farmers who make up about 70% of the total agricultural population in terms of labor in Nigeria. And so far, we've worked with about 25,000 women in our community, ensuring that these women get access to timely, funding, farming best practices, and of course, connectivity to competitive markets.
It appears it's only women from the north who have benefited from this project since you started. Any plans for female farmers in the south?
Well, that is largely because the women, the northern part is where we have the bulk of these women farmers. And of course, because of the digital divide and the access, gap as well, we have more farmers and then, of course, consequently more female farmers in the northern part. But again, we are held back in spreading because of, access to funding, access to, human resources too, which still comes back to funding. So we would like to expand because it's a continental challenge that we're solving, starting with Nigeria to start with. But we would rather deepen than spread ourselves so thin and then reduce the efficiency, of the HerVest solution.
And speaking of which, are there conditions that you're looking out for in order to get more partners?
Yes, we are constantly seeking for partners. We are solving for a continental challenge that has held a lot of women back due to patrilineal institutions, and some challenges that had reduced women from getting enough access, to even financial interventions in the agricultural sector. For instance, it might surprise you that the 70% of women get access to only 10% of the funding, that is structured funding that comes to these sectors because they lack the social permission. So talking about partnerships, we look for strategic partnerships that can help us scale the solution. At the moment, we currently work with the USAID. Thankfully, we've worked with the Kwara State government and even the Smallholder Women Farmers Organization of Nigeria itself. But we're constantly on the lookout for partners that will help, scale up the underwhelm that is affecting the entire agricultural sector as a whole. Because when you have 70% of your labor population underwhelmed because they lack access and inclusion, it affects everybody. So it's an imperative that we work with strategic partners that can help us scale funding, access, and resources required for Nigeria's largest contributor to our GDP.
Well, you've highlighted some funding challenges. Could you tell us at the moment, who bankrolls you? Who funds the activities at the moment?
Well, at the moment, we work with banks, right? That is, on the debt side, because our funding is actually bifolded. So we need funding for our operations, and then we need funding for the debt that we match as credits to these women. So the banks, and of course, peer-to-peer on the HerVest mobile applications, which is downloadable, helps to take care of the debt side. But for our operational expenses, we have some, investors, individual early-stage investors that have taken interest and funded. But because as the scope increases, we need more funding partners so that we can, as you've asked before, expand this to the entire nation and scale the solution. So our funding is bifolded, but we significantly need to scale because we're looking at about 12 million smallholder female farmers here, and we've only worked with less than 20. So you agree with me that we've barely scratched the surface, and we need to strengthen, of course, our food systems and food security. So we keep saying Africa will feed itself, but how much, are we stimulating into this sector in a sustainable way, like the HerVest way?
All right, then, Solape Akinpelu, thank you for your time on Africa 54.
Thank you for having us, Kimberly.